Hello.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar jam with the Florida Agritourism Association. This is our Q&A opportunity for all of our members, and we're really glad you're here with us tonight. In order to participate, we would like for you to type in questions in the chat on the right side of your screen, and then we have some slides to share throughout the presentation. We're joined today by our board member, Michelle Relch. She's currently serving as the secretary of the board. And of course, our founder, Lisa Ard, and director, Sarah Harris. I'm Lena Juarez. I'm the executive director, and we are just glad to see everybody and that you are, hopefully we can answer all your questions today. So I'll pass it off to my colleagues and to the audience.
Welcome, everybody. So we'd love to see some questions come in. And I'm going off my phone, so I'll ask Sarah to read any questions. And if we don't get any questions right away, we have some questions that we heard from other members that they'd be interested in seeing. Sarah, do we have anything yet?
I don't see any questions yet.
All right, well, then I'm going to talk about a little bit about liability signs. So as you know, the statute requires that you have liability signs at the entrance to your agritourism operation and where your agritourism activity takes place. So how many signs should you have? And the statute prescribes not only that you must have signs to get the affirmative legal liability protection, but it also prescribes that the signs must be on a background that has that you can read the lettering. The lettering has to be in black, and the statute also prescribes the exactly what the sign has to say. So you'll want those signs at your public entrance, and then you'll want those signs every place that the public is going. So let's say you have a U-pick operation, and I'm thinking of one in particular and it's a huge blueberry U-pick, and you have people that might come in, they might pay. Yeah, maybe they see your sign when they're paying, maybe they saw your entrance sign, but what if they didn't? So we suggest that you have signs located in lots of different places around your operation to make sure that everybody sees that sign, because this is your best protection for your affirmative legal liability. And so right there, that's the sign that Sarah is showing. That's what's prescribed in statute. And we also have these signs for sale. So if you don't want to worry that you're getting the right sign, please go to visitfloridafarms.com and you can purchase your signs there. So more signs, err on the side of the more signs, the better. And that's not just because we're trying to sell signs, but because we think it's really important to have enough signage so that the public is notified about, the things that they could experience on being in an agritourism. It protects them and it protects you.
Okay, so we do have a question.
Great.
What is the biggest challenge to expanding agritourism in the state of Florida coming out of the pandemic? It's a good question.
Well, I'll venture to say, but I think Michelle has some real life examples. I'm not sure there has been a big challenge. I would say that agritourism was booming throughout the pandemic because people wanted to be outside. They wanted to just be on the farms, be on your ranches, and enjoy whatever activities were able to be offered in a safe environment. And thus far, I mean, we have not heard of really any challenges that members are having as we're getting out of the pandemic. But Michelle, you might want to chime in on this. Oh, you're on mute, Michelle.
Mute, Michelle.
No.
Well, while she's trying to figure out her microphone, to echo what Lena was saying, And you specifically said expansion. So obviously, if you're adding different types of agritourism activities, what we have found is that the public is incredibly hungry. We are getting more hits on our website. More people are joining our Facebook page. More people are checking out our the events that are going on. There's a ton of fall events, and we sent out a press release this past week about all of the fall crop mazes and the events that are going on. So I think what's happened is I think agritourism has really come to the forefront because so many people were going and buying vegetables off of their local farms during the pandemic, and they were getting out and they couldn't safely social distance inside. So, I mean, I think it gave a greater emphasis on agritourism activities. I think this is going to be a huge fall season for our operators. Michelle, were you able to figure that out?
I've had a couple people not be able to do their activities this year. A couple people have decided not to do their corn mazes for just various reasons. But most of our people, we've been having a lot of goat yoga, and in fact, more of y'all have been offering that than ever. So we have another question. I'm having a hard time finding information on how to start an apiary for ag, like how many hives per acre I need to qualify. And
So I don't know that off the top of my head, but obviously beekeeping is protected under the agritourism statute. But you know what? If you will put your contact information, do you have that, Michelle? I mean, not Michelle.
I do. Have that Tony Hogg is on here.
Tony,
and he's a member of our board, and he is also a beekeeper. So
yeah,
Tony,
I'm wondering if he might be able to type in an answer. It's not ideal, but I can certainly connect the two of you.
Yeah, we'll make sure you get that information. I just don't know the number of hives per acre, but it's certainly a recognized, farm activity.
Tony's responded that he can help with the apiary information.
Excellent. Thank you, Tony. I will give you Tony's contact information so you can connect.
Tony actually in the past has been the president of the state association, and he has
he knows his bees.
Yeah. He is, in fact, he was who my husband brought all his beekeeping supplies from. So he is quite the expert.
Good. We have another question. How many operators are currently listed? We have roughly 250. I could look it up. The Florida Department of Agriculture, and Lenny, you can correct me on this.
I know this answer. Yeah, there are over 4,000 farms and ranches in the state of Florida, but many of them are not interested in doing any kind of agritourism activities. They could be well-established cattle ranches. So I see if you're looking for the potential, it's there, but I think it takes a really special farmer or a rancher to start an agritourism operation. So we appreciate all of you.
Yeah, I know that FTAX at one point thought there were roughly 700 active agritourism operators out there. Some of them may be smaller UPICs who don't know about us, but we've certainly grown.
And if you know other farms that are doing agritourism, please refer them to us. We do a lot of advocacy on behalf of the industry. We do a lot of education. We're adding in more webinars. We have a schedule for the next 6 months for some really great webinars. And we're looking for members because a lot of volunteerism has gone on over the last 8 years to sustain this association. And so we need the dues to keep running the app, to keep running the website, to do all the things that we're doing. And we're hoping, we were planning a conference last year and it got derailed, and it's continued to be derailed until we know that we can safely gather in person beyond the pandemic. So that's something that's coming. We're so excited to have our first statewide.
Involved in that, in cottage food production, The limit was significantly raised this past session, and we have invited a longtime collaborator of ours from the Florida Restaurant and Lodging Association, and then we also have invited someone from the Florida Department of Agriculture to be part of that. So we're looking probably late this month to schedule that. So keep that on your radar screen if that's something of interest or any of your fellow farmers.
So if we don't have any questions right now, one of the things that kind of is near and dear to my heart, I'm no longer acting as an operator because my husband has had some health issues, but for 10 years we did an event twice a year on our farm. And one of the things that I took a lot of time and care with was our public safety plan. And so when we get, as we're adding more webinars, we'll probably do a deep dive into public safety. Working with your local fire department, having an access for an ambulance to come in. 3 different occasions over 10 years, we had to bring an ambulance onto our property. So we had to have a clean, clear path. We had thousands of people on the property at the time. So we had to have a path and a plan. We had plans for lost children. We had plans for something as sinister as an active shooter. We did bag checks for weapons and asked people if they were bringing weapons in, that they had, carry permits. And so public safety plan is really, really important, kind of thinking through all the things that could possibly go wrong. Unfortunately, that's the era that we live in. And even if it's not something that's a particular danger, sometimes people get a bee sting, or if you have apiaries on your property. So just all those things. We also hired an EMT. I had law enforcement on site. So we really encourage you to put together a public safety plan. So we will have that as a subject of a future webinar. Sarah, you said we have another question.
We have a couple more questions that have come in. Can you explain more about the advocacy you guys do?
Sure. Lisa and I can tag team on this one. So in 2013, the statute was passed by the Florida legislature, setting up the agritourism protection law that you all enjoy right now. And then it was further tweaked in 2016. So we make sure that each legislative session, there are no bills to try to undermine what is currently in statute. And then we also try to be proactive and make legislators aware of the importance of agritourism and its impact on the economy, since agriculture is our second largest economic driver in the state. But a lot of it is maintaining great relationships with the legislative leadership. Lisa and I have a lot of experience and background in this area, and it really is a pleasure to continue to do this for the association.
Yeah, and one thing I would add is last session we were part of a group in the agricultural industry. The Senate president currently, President Wilton Simpson, is a farmer himself. He is now actually running for agriculture commissioner. And he really promoted the idea of putting agritourism and the Florida Right to Farm Act, which it previously was not located in there. So for those of you that don't understand the Florida Right to Farm Act, that's been around historically, probably since the 70s. It got put in most states in the country. And it's the idea of you have an existing farm and that people move in next door to you. Your development moves in around you, and that you do not lose your right to be a farmer, that you are protected. And they changed that part of the statute not only to include agritourism as protected under the Right to Farm Act, but also to stop nuisance lawsuits. And so that people were just not suing as a nuisance, that they have to make a case. So that was a really big deal to get added to that statute. And then, like Lena says, probably every other year, a legislator will come up and say, oh, well, I had somebody call me and there was a problem. And they try to they try to run a bill, and Lena and I, along with Farm Bureau, and we go with the staff, and actually the legislative staff has been incredibly helpful, as working with the FDACs has as well, to always push back and please don't touch our law, because we don't like opening it up, because that puts it at risk. Not everybody loves our law, if you can imagine.
Another question. How do I make my barn legal for events?
We had to go through a process of doing that. We had the county permitting department come out and walk through our barn and give us information that we needed. We had a general contractor come out and walk through the barn and give us all of their rules and regulations. Everything's published under the fire code. That's the first place that you want to start. And, for any occupancy that has people inside your area, are specific rules and regulations. They're county specific, but also state specific. So, something as simple as having all of your wiring inside conduit above 8 feet. You have to go above 8 feet. So there's lots of rules. You have to have rat runs between rafters and hurricane clips on your rafters. So we spent a lot of time and money getting our barn, because ours was an authentic barn. We had to update quite a bit so that we were able to have people come into our barn safely.
Thank you for that, Michelle. That is so helpful from an operator's perspective. I'll tell you from legislatively, I guess it was 4 or 5 years ago, we worked with the state fire marshal's office. They passed legislation, and then they put into rule, there's 3 classes of barns. So pole barns are exempt. And so that means, I think what the statute says is 30% can be enclosed. So it's basically one wall and a couple of go around the corner a little bit. It's got to be predominantly open to be exempt. Then there's 3 classes. And it has to do with how often you have events, has to do with the number of people per square foot, both whether you have tables and chairs or whether you just have chairs, and there's a formula in rule. And it has to do with the number of people allowed at any event at any given time. So most people, I think, are class 2, because once you hit class 3, then you're required to comply with a fire suppression system. And it's a certain number of square feet. I think one time we looked at it, if you have a 10,000 square foot barn, you can have up to 299 people before you hit the fire suppression limits. But every single year, your local fire inspector has to come out and measure your square footage. If you added a stage, that could deduct from your square footage. And they have to do a calculation. This is the number of people you can have if you have tables and chairs. This is the number of people you can have if you just have chairs. And it's just a formula. But since we passed that, because everybody knows the rules, and there's very few events that exceed 300 if you have the right size barn. But again, it has to be size. So it depends on the size of your barn. But we can give you more information about the statute and rule and how you get in contact with your local fire officials.
And the next question, yes, Eva should contact me about keeping track of the USF internship, the student that's doing her internship on promoting agritourism with minority farmers. I have a feeling that the Commissioner of Agriculture is keeping track of that, and we could probably connect you with the correct person to find out that information.
Yeah, it's really important. That's an incredibly important topic. I read some statistic that the number of minority farmers was shrinking in Florida. And it has to do with, so we're losing so much farmland, especially heritage farmland, to development. And I think we all kind of understand the free market, and they get offered so much money per acre for land that's been traditionally been farmland. And farming is hard. This is not easy. That's one of the things that agritourism gives is an additional option to add revenue for a farm. That's why the legislature put this in place. That's why it's been such a positive thing. But I think it's all farms are at risk, but particularly historically minority farms, I think, are at risk. But I did read something. I'll see if I can find the article as well that I read recently about the number of minority farmers had decreased. I think particularly African-American farms.
What is a bona fide farm?
So a bona fide farm is defined in statute. It's actually the statute that is the ag exemption. We call it green belt classification. It's where a property appraiser in each county is given the authority, and this is the statute here, and we can send you this document, but they are given the authority by the legislature to say, you are a farm or you aren't a farm. So basically, a bona fide farm has to meet the standards in the statute. And what they look at is, have you historically been a farmer? What portion of your land are you farming? And you can't just, so a lot of people think they can put in a petting zoo and that's farming, but it is not. You have to actively be trying to grow. It's you pick and sell your food. That's how you pick or you sell it to grocery stores. You have to be making a good faith effort to sell the product you are raising. So if you have goats, you're selling goat milk, you're making goat soap, or you're selling baby goats. Horses, you're raising horses, you're selling horses. Anything that you're doing, you have to be attempting to make a living as a farmer, to be considered a bona fide farm. But all of that decision making is done through your county property appraiser's office, and they often have an expert that will walk you through the process. Michelle, do you have anything to add? You are a cattle farmer.
We have cattle on our farm, and we also have blueberries, and then we sell sunflowers as well. We have a sunflower farm as well. And recently I had to contact our local property appraiser because they had removed greenbelt from a section of our land. And the statute is very clear that they can't remove it just because you're having agritourism activities on your farm. So produce receipts.
Yeah, no, we cut hay on our property, and they don't come out every year, but probably every other year, and they inspect our equipment. They make sure we have the baling equipment and that we have the string, and frankly, our hay is sold before we cut. But we produce and it's to a single farmer. It's a big cattle farmer. And so he buys everything we produce. And honestly, if I could produce 10 times the amount of hay, I could sell 10 times the amount of hay because it's hard to find good hay. And, but we do the invoice. We have a copy of his check. And it's, because it's consistency, it's the same farmer, and, they can kind of go call him and say, oh yeah, I buy my hay from the Ard farm. And, but they come and inspect our equipment and, want to know we're purchasing fuel. And so all of those things.
Do you think further agritourism development could be considered a resilience strategy for future pandemics, as it would help keep farmers afloat and promote more local food production and not be so reliant on imported foods?
I'm sure the Commissioner of Agriculture, no matter who he or she is, would like that to happen. I don't know. I mean, that's a great question. I mean, in our lifetimes, this is a big pandemic that we're all experiencing. So I think if anyone's keeping track of the data, this is the time and to develop a response, a better strategy in the future that relates to agriculture and food production.
Yeah, and I think that the pandemic laid bare, whether it be for pharmaceuticals or, whatever that is all on those freighters off the coast of California right now that can't get in. I think it laid bare that we have become very reliant on foreign production, and things if it's home decor, maybe we don't care as much. If it's clothing, maybe we don't care as much. But if it's something that's critical to our food and drug supply chain, I think it's incredibly critical. So I think you'll see some policies, whether they're at the federal or the state level, that start to incentivize that food production, that may, remains interior. But then there's lots of, it's complicated because of labor issues and immigration issues, and it's a complex topic. I wish there was an easy answer, but farm labor is one of the biggest challenges, and that's all wrapped up in immigration. And so I don't know how you solve that, frankly. I mean, I think it's a big challenge, but I think it's something we have to pay attention to, because I think the pandemic did lay bare some of the challenges with the food supply.
Yeah, and I think agritourism could definitely help people, tying into the food supply, getting people to the farm. Maybe they would plant a sunflower field that they haven't done before. Try something different to get people on the
Right.
on the farm, aside from just their crops. And kind of related to labor, are any of our members, do you know of using interns in the operations? Michelle, have you used interns before?
We have had 2 interns from the University of Florida with their hospitality industry. And there is some work involved. It's great to have an extra set of hands on the, in the business aspect of the business, but there is some paperwork involved in quarterly reports or throughout the semester. I love having an intern. I'd love to have another one if I could get my hands on one. But it is definitely, it's not without some work. So, I would encourage you to take that on, but be aware that there is some work involved.
If I plant a crop maize and charge admission, does that qualify as farming?
So you have to do some other farming besides the crop maize. So it does not qualify you for your Bonafide farm, because you're not producing something that you can sell, a tangible product. So let's say you grew a field of corn. Let's say you were a corn grower or sorghum, which is what we find. You might be interested to know that sorghum is typically used. We have some corn mazes, but we have a lot more sorghum mazes because it tends to grow faster and it's more drought tolerant than corn is in the state of Florida, and it takes the heat better. So we see a lot of crop mazes. You need to know that crop maize in particular, while it might be on part of your farm, it won't qualify you for your Bonafide farm, if that makes sense.
And here's a good one. This is the question we get probably more than anything. How would you best deal with a county that doesn't want you in operation? That is a doozy.
Mm-hmm. I mean, first of all, we need some more information, and we're happy to, if you would like to call us tomorrow, that would be wonderful. We probably can give you some more specific advice. But I mean, as long as you have your Greenbelt designation, so you are actively farming or ranching, you do qualify as an agritourism operator. So, I mean, if this is like an overall issue with the county not liking agritourism in general, it's allowed, it's allowed in statute. So we would really appreciate you getting into more of the specifics with us so we can help you.
Yeah,
I would like to share that when I first opened my business, I went to the county. I went to Hillsborough County and said, this is what I want to do. They immediately said, no, you can't do that. And then I went to the head of the planning department and had them come out to my farm. I invited them out, and we had them read the statute, and then there was no denying that they really couldn't deny us the ability to do that on our farm. So, but I would like to encourage whoever's having a problem, go and sit down and talk to them, invite them to your farm, let them know that you're not the boogeyman. and that, there are things that you can do to allay or appease their worries. A lot of times they are afraid that you will let things get out of hand. So if you have an emergency plan in place, you've called the fire department, you've reached out to the police department, you get security when there are large groups of people, you let them know that you are managing the situation, and their primary concern is public safety. So if you let them know that you are addressing those issues, then that should help. But don't wait for them to come knocking on your door. Go to them, invite them to your farm, let them know that you're running this as a real business, and that you're going to handle public safety first and foremost.
Yeah, so a couple interesting things about Michelle in particular. Hillsborough County was one of those counties when this law first passed that were very resistant. And I will tell you, I probably haven't had a call about Hillsborough County in a couple of years. They, in fact, somebody complains, they're like,
we're still getting calls, Lisa.
Oh, we are. Yeah. Well, it is less than,
but it's a lot better. Yeah.
Yeah. And typically the county attorney goes, oh, that's agritourism. We're preempted. And I don't know that they always love that, but they do have a better understanding of the law now. And the other thing else I love about Michelle has some pretty close neighbors. And when we visited her farm, she has a decibel rule on her DJs for her events. And I think that's really important. And you can talk more about that, Michelle, but it's really important to be a good neighbor. Just because you have protection under the statute, and we're going to fight for that protection, we want agritourism to have a great name. We don't want to have to get dragged into a member's office at the legislature or get blessed out by a county commissioner because he's getting phone calls because an operator's not being a good neighbor. Have an event, have a farm to table dinner and invite all of your neighbors over, give them free tickets. If you have events, I gave all my neighbors free tickets. Do anything you can to be a good neighbor so they see you as an asset in their community and not a liability.
I will speak to that too. I have that in my contract, and I communicate very clearly to the clients that are renting the farm for the day that we do have, we're in unincorporated Hillsborough County, so there's no real noise ordinance where we are, but we do have neighbors, and we
out in the country, you froze.
Yeah, that's the problem with rural internet.
We don't allow we don't allow standard drums. They have to have electronic drums. So regular standard drums will be so loud that you'll hear them across Plant City. So we make them have electronic drums if we do have a band, and we're very, very picky about bands coming out because it's so hard to manage the sound, especially in a building with a tin roof. It's very difficult. So we have a defined list of DJs who follow our rules and keep their sound at a decent level. We say below 90 decibels. And I have decibel meters on my phone. You can get an app that will do that, that will monitor the sound. Honestly, the decibel meters that you could buy on the internet are not as good as the apps on your cell phone. So don't waste your money on those. They're hundreds or thousands of dollars. They just don't work as well as what you can get on your cell phone. And just have rules about last call for alcohol so that you don't have drunk clients driving into your neighbors' yards. You really have to be a good neighbor, because that's where the complaints are going to come from, is from your neighbors that go to the county. And that's where you end up getting that knock on your door. So we work really, really hard at that. And there are other farms in Hillsborough County that don't do that, and they have gone under because of the complaints. Then they just start getting all of these visits from health and food safety, and the police are coming, the fire department's coming. If you're not managing those kinds of social situations, you're going to have problems.
Thank you.
For Ag Zone, do they want to see you stick to one form of income for a long time? Is it hard to switch? For example, from cows to bees in Tony's situation. I've had this question come up before. As far as the property appraiser goes.
I don't think it's hard to switch, but I think you have to have a plan in place because obviously cows take up a lot more of your land than bees do. So the way the property appraiser works is, grazing pasture, they have a formula for number of cows per acre, and you can put a heck of a lot of beehives. I mean, on my property, I have 15, and we really didn't ever use that for our ag. My husband was just a hobby farmer. We didn't ever use that for our ag designation, even though we had bees. But he does 15 hives in a very small footprint. And so you could have 1,000 hives on an acre. So yes, you can switch over, but you need to really understand how much land you need to be farming and how much land you're going to be using for your agritourism operation because they will overlap.
Have you ever tried to develop a tour guide bank or program for farmers to draw on if they don't have the capacity or time to do the tours themselves?
We have it. That's an interesting idea.
Mm-hmm. I think these questions have been coming from Brooke, and she and I have had some conversations, and so maybe this is our opportunity to expand that.
Right. Yeah. We'd love all the ideas you can because we pass them along to operators, and one operator will go, "Hey, that's a great idea." I don't know how you have a bank though. I mean, Florida's so big, so diverse. Our crops come in seasons. I mean, Sarah is responsible for putting up the U-Picks or really all the events, all the farm things. And how long is a blueberry? Six weeks? The season?
It's very, like April to July.
Yeah, from south to north
Depending on
Florida.
where you are, right.
The blueberry season, depending on your geographic location. So we'd probably have to have regional tour guides if we were going to explore something like that.
Mm-hmm.
The agriculture is a statute. In the statute mentions off-site impact. What does that mean? I think we've addressed that, especially with wedding barns and venues. Are there other off-site impacts?
We tend to think of traffic and noise. Those are two of the things that can get you in trouble. So I'll give you an example. Fortunately, we managed it, but it was a Roy moment. We had an event, and they just kept coming. It was the biggest year we'd ever had. We had a single entrance and a single exit. The following year, we bought additional property so that we could create multiple ingress, egress. But I had traffic backed up to a main highway for 2.5 miles for a 3-hour period. And so everybody was calm. I actually did not get one complaint because we put on such a heck of an event and everybody loved it. But I was a little panicky. I thought, if I'm ever going to get nailed, it's going to be that. But the commissioner's office, the county must not have gotten any complaints. I think everybody kind of rolled with it because it was the only time it ever happened. It never happened again. We mitigated that ever happening by managing our traffic and our parking and our ingress, egress better. But something like that, had that happened consistently, particularly if it was happening every weekend. I only held events, major events twice a year. I think people can live with it once. But I think if it was happening once a month, I probably would have gotten some complaints. So
some of the complaints I get from people calling are noise is the big one, traffic, of course, and trash. Mm-hmm. People, especially we have one member who does blueberry U-Pick, and they actually went to their neighbors and gave everyone blueberries, and someone still complained. And you can't keep the trash in the cars, but you can try to be a good neighbor and maybe clean it up or have, scouts or volunteers come and help. These are just things that I think the statute is talking about.
Yeah, so it's something that would be a significant offsite impact. We've had some, it's typically noise complaints. We always hear, well, what if somebody has 10,000 people come for a concert? It hasn't happened. I'm not saying it won't happen in Florida, but it hasn't happened. But I think that's like a big fear that somebody
That's
would
kind
have.
of a related question. Where is the 90 decibel sound level measured?
Okay, so I can speak to that because another local venue actually they were trying to shut them down. The county was actually trying to shut them down. And so my understanding of it is it's at your property line. So I think it's within like 50 yards of your building or your property line. And so when we measure it at our property line. So, and it's never 90 decibels. I mean, we have a pretty space, and we keep buying up more, as we go out. But also another thing to consider with the decibel level concern is your employees.
Your staff.
Mm-hmm. If you're going to allow the sound to get above, yes.
I'm scanning through the questions. I think we've answered everything I see. Does anyone else have any questions?
We're just really glad that we're going to be able to connect some of our operators. You all are the best ones to compare notes and see what's successful, what's been challenging, and make your operations even better.
And we're going to specialize some of our webinars on topics. We're hoping Michelle will grace us with her presence again to talk specifically about, we've got a couple of really great wedding barn operators and venue operators. And so we want to come back, and for people who are interested in adding that to their farm, there's some very specific things. Michelle is a very high-tech operation. She's got cameras. She's got, you name it, she has figured it out. It's really impressive. So we will have one specific to running a venue like a wedding barn coming up in the future. So this was very generalist, but we want to bring you some things that are very specific, because obviously a crop maze is different than a U-pick, is different than a wedding venue.
Right.
Some things in common, but there are a lot of differences as well.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and we really appreciate your feedback, because we can do this once a year. We can do it more than once a year just to answer questions if you all find that helpful. But I agree with Lisa, having the more specific webinars might attract, you might think of some new business opportunities that you hadn't even considered.
Right.
There's one more comment. Noise ordinances specific to each county. Barton County, for example, has no decibel level stipulated. It's an audible discretionary decision. So each county is different.
Right. That's the same with all of the offsite impacts. Each county has different offsite impacts.
So while most
so with that,
go ahead.
I would say with that, find out who's coming to visit your farm, get them out. Have them do a noise check with your sound system or with, your DJ's sound system. Have them be right there on the property at whatever part of your property they're going to be checking it, and have them tell you what's too loud. So that way you don't have any problems moving forward. And it's just a matter of respect, that you're showing them respect by asking for their input. And that way they can tell you. You can mark it on the DJ's soundboard. Here's where you stop. You don't turn it above this sound. And then you won't have any problems. Shouldn't.
Again, I emphasize, be a good neighbor, be a good neighbor, be a good neighbor. We are finding that the operators that are proactive in their relationships with their local elected officials, who invite them to the farm, who do everything they can to build a good relationship, get to know your county commissioner, get to know all your county commissioners, offer up maybe a free, if they need a venue for something, for Boy Scouts, be a good civic partner, anything that you can do to be part of your community. You obviously have a profit motive, but if you're a good civic community partner, you do a couple free events a year, that kind of thing. It just goes a long way. It makes our jobs easier and it makes you more successful. The ones that do that don't tend to have many problems.
So with that, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Thank you, special guest Michelle. We really appreciate your input. And to everyone who's been watching, we hope you spread the word that this has been helpful for you. And we hope to see you at the next webinar.
We'll be sending information around in the next few weeks.
Good night.
So thank you, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.